Earl Simmons had $247 in his checking account and a tuition bill for $57,200 the morning he drove his 2009 Honda Civic from Winston-Salem to Atlanta with his family to tape Family Feud. The tuition bill was for his daughter Zoe's first year at Harvard University. Zoe had been accepted in March. He had taken the call in a supply closet at Reynolds High School, where he had cleaned floors for 19 years. And she had said, "Daddy, I got in," and he had pressed the phone to his chest and stood in the dark between the mop and the shelf of industrial cleaner and thanked God in the only way he knew how, which was silently and completely. He had told her she was going. He had not told her he had no idea how. 3 months later, in the final round of Family Feud Fast Money, with the score at 194 and Zoe behind the soundproof partition, not knowing his total, Earl Simmons answered the last question, and the board flashed 200 exactly. He had won $250,000. He turned toward Steve Harvey. He did not speak. He simply pointed at the ceiling, and Steve Harvey, who had been watching this man for 40 minutes and knew exactly what $250,000 meant and to whom it was going, sat down on the floor of his own stage and wept. It was a Saturday in August, and the studio was running warm and fast. The Simmons family had arrived in Atlanta the night before, staying at a Days Inn on the highway, where Earl had paid for 2 rooms with a credit card that had $340 left on it. He had calculated carefully. Gas, hotel, food for the drive. He knew the number of every dollar they spent. He had been doing that since 2011, when his wife Lynette died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning on her way to her nursing shift, leaving him with 2 daughters, Zoe, 9 at the time, and Maya, 6, and a mortgage that required both of their salaries and a world that had stopped making its previous kind of sense. Earl had not remarried. He had considered it once, briefly, around 2016, and then he had considered what Zoe and Maya needed most, and he had put the consideration away and gone back to work. He cleaned floors at Reynolds High School 5 days a week, 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he picked up an evening shift at a medical office park downtown. On Saturdays in the summer, he did yard work for 3 families in his neighborhood. He was in bed by 10 and up by 5, and had not taken a vacation since Lynette's funeral. Zoe had graduated valedictorian of her high school class in May. Her speech had been about her father. It had made the parents in the auditorium cry. It had made the faculty cry. Earl had sat in the 3rd row in his one good suit and had not cried during the speech because he had decided before he sat down that he was not going to cry at his daughter's graduation, and he had held to that. He had cried in the parking lot, later with Maya's arm around him, for about 90 seconds, and then he had pulled himself together because there was still a reception to get to. The Harvard acceptance had been the best and the worst thing that had happened to Earl in 13 years. Best because Zoe deserved it. Worst because the financial aid package, while generous, left a gap of $57,200 for the first year alone. Earl had spent 3 weeks after the acceptance letter running numbers. He had looked at parent plus loans. He had looked at second mortgages. He had called his sister in Charlotte, who had offered $2,000 and more guilt than the money was worth. He had applied to 3 emergency grant programs and been denied twice and was waiting on the 3rd. He had not told Zoe about any of it. When Zoe asked, he said, "We'll figure it out." He said it with the voice he used when things were decided. But nobody in that studio knew what $247 looked like. The Simmons family had come as a team. Earl, Zoe, Maya, now 19, his sister-in-law Carla, and Carla's son Devin. They were loud and joyful and deeply competitive in the way that families who have learned to manufacture their own joy tend to be. The green room had been full of laughter. Steve Harvey had stopped by before the taping, as he sometimes did, and had spent 3 minutes with the Simmons family and had come back to his producer and said, "That man right there has a story." His producer had already read the casting file. The game had been extraordinary. The Simmons family had answered with the speed and coordination of a team that had been practicing together in the living room for 2 months, which they had. They had gone into the fast money round with a score that put them in position to win. Earl had volunteered to go first, as he always did. In everything, he went first. He had answered 5 questions in 23 seconds. The 5 answers had scored 143 points. The real story hadn't even started yet. Zoe went behind the partition. She had headphones on. She could not hear what her father had scored. She answered her 5 questions with a precision that suggested she had been storing answers to hypothetical game show questions in the back of her mind since childhood, which Carla later confirmed she had. Her 5 answers came back. The first 4 added 22 points. The score stood at 165. The last question was displayed. Zoe had said a word. The board stalled for a theatrical second. Then it flashed, 35. The total was 200. The buzzer sounded. The light on the scoreboard went from yellow to green. Earl Simmons turned around and pointed at the ceiling. That was all. He pointed up, with one hand, and he did not make a sound, and the look on his face was the look of a man who has been carrying something for a very long time and has just felt the weight leave. Steve Harvey had already come down from the podium. He was standing 6 feet away, and he had watched Earl's face for the entire fast money round with the focus of a man who understands what is actually happening in a room. He saw the point at the ceiling. He saw the face. And Steve Harvey, who has learned in 30 years of television to meet every emotion with the one it needs, did not give a speech. He did not announce the prize with fanfare. He sat down on the floor of the Family Feud stage, in his good suit, and put his face in his hands. The studio fell completely silent. 300 people watched Steve Harvey sit on the floor with his face in his hands while the scoreboard behind him flashed $250,000 in letters tall enough to read from the back row. When Steve lifted his face, he was not composed. He said, "I'm sorry. Give me a second." He got up slowly. He walked to Earl, who had not moved from his spot near the fast money booth. He put both hands on Earl's shoulders and looked at him directly and said, "Tell me what this money means." And Earl, who had held everything together through 19 years of early mornings and 2 jobs in parking lot crying and 1 good suit, said simply, "My daughter's going to Harvard." The audience erupted. Zoe, who had just removed her headphones and did not know the total, did not understand why the room had dissolved until Marcus pointed at the scoreboard. She looked at it. She looked at her father. And then she crossed the distance between them in 4 steps, and Earl Simmons held his daughter on the Family Feud stage, while 297 of the 300 people in the studio audience were crying. The other 3 were trying very hard not to. Steve Harvey waited. He was not done. He pulled his phone out and called his chief of staff. He said, "We're going to set up the Simmons Fund today. I want it done before the taping wraps." He announced, live on the taping floor, that in addition to the $250,000 prize, he was personally establishing an education fund in Zoe Simmons' name, an additional $50,000 designated for 4 years of supplemental educational expenses. He said no child who has been accepted to Harvard should go because her father can do math. She should go because she is brilliant and her father is the best kind of man. He turned to the camera. "I want everyone at home watching to understand what this man is. He cleaned floors for 19 years. He worked 3 jobs. He never asked anybody for anything. He just showed up. He paused. That's the American story. That's the whole American story, right there. The competing family, the Okafor family from Maryland, had played with fierce energy all day. After the final announcement, Chidinma Okafor, the matriarch, raised her hand and said, "We would like to donate our appearance prize to Zoe's fund." The audience erupted again. Steve Harvey nodded. He said, "That's what winning looks like." The episode aired 7 weeks later. The clip of Steve sitting on the floor became the most replayed Family Feud clip of the year, with 315 million views in 15 days. The hashtag pointing at the ceiling was used globally and inspired an entire subgenre of social media posts in which people described the moments in their lives when they had nothing left to do but point up. Zoe Simmons wrote about the taping in her Harvard application essay supplement, which had been submitted before the taping occurred. She rewrote it after. 3 months after the taping, Zoe Simmons moved into her dorm room at Harvard. Earl helped her carry boxes. He drove 12 hours each way. He ate 2 meals in the car both days. When he left, Zoe stood on the steps of her dormitory and watched his 2009 Honda Civic pull out of the parking lot. And she called him when he hit the highway, and they talked for an hour and 40 minutes until he needed to focus on the drive. A year later, Earl Simmons retired from Reynolds High School. He was honored at the end-of-year assembly. The student body gave him a standing ovation. He had cleaned the floors of their school for 19 years, and 4 of them had no idea. He said, in his remarks, 4 sentences. "Work is not beneath you. Your job is not your ceiling. Every floor I cleaned, I was thinking about my daughters. Look at where they are now." Maya graduated from NC State the same year. Earl was at both graduations in his one good suit. He cried at both of them, not in the parking lot, but at the ceremonies, openly, without embarrassment, because he had decided that he had earned it. Today, Zoe Simmons is in her 3rd year at Harvard Law. Earl lives in Winston-Salem. He does occasional yard work, not because he has to, but because the mornings are long, and he is not a man who knows how to stop moving. His checking account has more than $247 in it. He still has the tuition bill. He keeps it in a kitchen drawer. He says he keeps it to remember what it felt like to not know how something was going to work out. Zoe once asked him why he doesn't just throw it away. He said, "Because someday your daughter is going to have a bill she can't see past, and I want you to show her that." If this story about a father who cleaned floors for 19 years and never once stopped believing moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who is carrying something heavy right now and needs to know that the work is not invisible. Have you ever watched someone receive exactly what they deserved? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more moments that restore your faith in what is still possible.